Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm getting back to one of my favorite genres, and that is classic literature. Earlier this year I read a book that I'm pretty sure is now in the top 10 for sure, if not top 5 favorite classic books, and that is The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. As with all of my reviews, I'm going to give a brief synopsis followed by my personal review, then some content and trigger warnings, and lastly some spoilers. Everything will be timestamped if you want to jump around or skip sections or jump 2 sections. It'll be listed below. The House of Mirth was published in 1905. Edith Wharton was actually the first woman to win the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, not for this novel, but for one of her other ones, The Age of Innocence, which I have not read yet. Also, as I was reading some about her just in getting ready for this video, I found out that the phrase keeping up with the Joneses originated with her family. I guess her father's family was very wealthy, and yeah, that's how the phrase came about. The House of Mirth is the story of Lily Bart. She was born into a certain bracket of society, very well-to-do, but when both of her parents die, she realizes that the money that she'd always counted on was not as plentiful as she had been led to believe. She ends up needing to move in with one of her aunts, who isn't necessarily the most pleasant person to be around, but living with her will still give Lily access to the type of society that she wants to live with. Her aunt is also able to give her a decent-sized allowance, she's able to keep her friends, and she's able to still be in keeping with the societal customs of that time for a single woman. Unfortunately, her money continues to dwindle, and Lily has to figure out how to get more money so that she doesn't lose her social circle. She has to figure out how to save her name, her face, her place in society, and she's also trying to create a life for herself as a single woman when society just wanted her to get married. At first, she has lots of options for her husband, but she never says yes to anyone, and then the options kind of start to dwindle. Throughout the story, we see some of those whys. Why did she never say yes to anyone? We see some of her longings for an authentic life, for an authentic relationship, how she wants more than just the small box that society says she needs to exist in. I really liked this book. As I said, it is now one of my favorite classic literature books. It was my first Edith Wharton, but I definitely want to read more from her because I really like this one. There are so many great thoughts and themes in this book. Lily was stuck in a society in the early 1900s in a system that really wanted Lily to be one way. They wanted her to be one thing. A woman could Well, that's not true. A woman could do 2 things. She could be married, or she could be trying to attract a beau. And society also gave her a list of the appropriate ways to try to attract a beau. And if you can't marry for love, you should marry for money. And honestly, marrying for money is probably the better bet because that gives you more guarantees in life anyway. Within that context, Lily's options are quite limited, but she used the few options that she had to try to create a life for herself. Unfortunately, it didn't always work out for her, but she was trying. You can see her grappling with the desire to find someone to marry for love, but still the desire and the perceived necessity to marry a certain social class of person. You can see her grappling with who she is, who she wants to be, and who society wants her to be. This book is fiction, but it also depicts the lives of so many women, particularly from that time period. It also reminded me a lot about some of the ways that I grew up. I grew up in the 90s in the height of evangelical purity culture and the courtship movement, and I definitely was presented with the one box that I was expected to exist in. I was raised that my job was to get married, preferably young, and have kids. So a lot of Lily's story really resonated with me, even though Lily's specifics were different. I was not allowed to read this book when I was younger, and I remember some of those reasons being given. And one of the reasons was that Lily was manipulative. She was using her feminine wiles to attract a spouse. As I was reading it for the first time as an adult, I was really struck with how Lily was basically given a role within a game. The game is to find a spouse, but there's a long list of rules to follow to achieve that. So of course, Lily would do whatever she could to try to play that game. She was forced to play the game to survive. And it was so interesting to me to note that Lily and women in that time period, and even women in the 90s, growing up in purity culture, and I still see it today, when women play the game with the cards that they are dealt, it then gives people the stereotype of women being conniving or fake or backbiting or money grabbers. But literally, in order to survive, in order to provide for herself, Lily did what she had to do within very small confines of what she was allowed to do. Women have always had to be smart and think multiple steps ahead in order to do anything, in order to survive, to provide for themselves, and to provide for their kids. So no, I did not see Lily as this manipulative and shrewd person. I saw her as trying to exist and to make it through this game with the cards she was dealt. There are so many times when this book highlights so well what it is like to live in a world where someone else consistently has power and the main character has to cater to that person in power in order to make it through. The House of Mirth, it's one book, but it's broken up into, it's called book 1 and book 2, but it's all within the same book. There's a quote in book 1, chapter 13 that said, "She flamed with anger and abasement and the sickening need of having to conciliate where she longed to humble." That just really resonated with me with how much Lily had to keep so much of what she was feeling and what she wanted and what she desired inside, again, in order to just make it through and to do what she needed to do to try to take care of herself. Another quote in book 2, chapter 12. "I have tried hard, but life is difficult and I'm a very useless person. I can hardly be said to have an independent existence. I was just a screw or a cog in the great machine I called life, and when I dropped out of it, I found I was of no use anywhere else. What can one do when one finds that one only fits into one hole? One must get back to it or be thrown out into the rubbish heap. And you don't know what it's like in the rubbish heap." So many of the quotes or the ways that Lily thought really resonated with me as I was thinking about my own upbringing, about women throughout history, and about so many women today and all this alpha male stuff that is so prevalent and the roles that women are supposed to fulfill. I think Lily Bart's story is so important. It has so many great themes of what it means to be authentic, what it means to be a functioning member of society, of having hopes and dreams and wishes and goals. It talks about classism and money and shame and power, of having honor and pride for yourself, for your name, for your reputation. It was really good. There are some trigger warnings, so I do just want to mention those here. This book does deal with things like addiction, sexual assault, suicide, mental health, classism, misogyny, and emotional abuse. Okay, now this section, it will have a massive spoiler, so if you don't want a massive spoiler, skip this section. I think I'd heard inklings of how this book ends with Lily's death. And even with that mental and emotional preparation, I was still so sad. I truly was rooting for her. And there's a lot of discussion online as to whether or not her death was accidental or purposeful. I personally feel that it was accidental in the sense that that was not her goal that night, but also the depths of the mental hell in which she had sunk. I don't think that that was her goal, but I think that she was so discouraged and so depressed that also it wasn't entirely accidental, or at least that maybe she was just willing to accept what might happen. So I think the ideation was there, but I don't think it was her goal. And then how the book portrayed Selden and his response and his feelings and the way that he felt guilt and regret. So many powerful themes to think through related to the story. If you haven't read Edith Wharton, I would definitely recommend House of Mirth. At this point, I want to read everything else that she has written, which apparently is quite a lot. She's written a number of standalone novels, a large number of short stories. If you have read other things by her, let me know which ones and what you would recommend. And until next time, happy reading. She was born into a circuit bracket. Her aunt is a...